meeting wasn't called to order, but now the meeting is officially called to order. Melanie, would you call the roll, please?
Chair Wonderman,
Here.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Here and participating remotely due to illness. Apologies, everyone, but didn't want to expose you.
Director Alba. Here. Director Del Bono. Here. And Director Dew. We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Chair Wonderman, if I could interrupt for a second. Director Moyer, could you just for the record, please, in accordance with the Brown Act, let us know if there's anyone over the age of 18 in the room with you?
There's no one under the age of 18 in the room with me. In fact, there's no one in the room with me at all. Is that what you meant?
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Probably be illegal to ask what ages people are. But we don't have to go there. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, welcome to WETA's Board of Directors meeting. The meeting is being conducted in person and by video conference, is being recorded. To reduce background noise, all video conference participants will be joining the meeting in listening-only mode and will be muted during the discussion. WETA welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to email your name and item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you're unable to send an email, you will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thank you all, and I'm considering moving up the public comment period because I know there's some folks who want to join, but I don't see them. I don't see anyone there at the moment, so maybe we'll just hold on that a little while and see how it goes. If is that okay? We can't see everyone?
Unless they have their video, if their camera on, they won't show up.
They won't show up. Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Let's have the director's reports and then we'll do public comment period. Do I need a motion for that? I can just do that. So let's take that action. So in terms of my report, I'm happy to report that Director Murphy and I traveled to Portugal last week, to Lisbon, to participate in what's called the Economist World Oceans Summit. And so these are people who come from around the world, and there are, I'd say, numbered in the thousands, a couple of thousand people from all different walks of life to consider the problems, challenges being faced in the world's oceans, and more importantly, what to do about it. And so, you know, a lot of different scientific approaches and innovations and ideas and conversations, panels, speakers, academics, business leaders, and so forth, all focused on making sure that the world's oceans, which supply, you know, the air that we breathe and the food that we eat, and you know, our future is incredibly dependent on the quality of the oceans, and they've suffered so much damage at our hands that we're able to fix those problems and renew our oceans. And the reason that we were there was to participate in discussion. You will not be surprised about our future efforts to create a zero-emission electric battery and zero-emission ferry system. And so I was on a panel with some other folks to discuss that, and I thought it went. It was a lot of it, large audience, a lot of attention given to it. Really, a lot of interest from folks after, with lots of interesting questions and ideas, and people who are involved, and other agencies, who are engaged in this in some level or another. And after that, Seamus Murphy was able to arrange a meeting with us, with the heads of the ferry system in Lisbon. And so that was really great. And we were able to go over and visit with these people who were very, very nice to us and really appreciative of they're really appreciative of San Francisco, which is their sister city, and curious as to how much attention we pay to their sister cityness, because they pay a lot of attention to it. And for those of you who've been to Lisbon, there's a lot of similar kinds of qualities. They have their own Golden Gate Bridge. They have the city built on hillsides. They have, great transit systems, ferry system, live I think a very nice lifestyle in a temperate climate. So there's a lot of shared values, I think, between this region and their region. It was great. And I was just not surprisingly buoyed by the level of interest folks expressed about participating with us one way or another in seeing to it that our vision to have a zero emission system was fulfilled. So all kinds of offers to help, ideas, invitations, and so forth. And I'll say something I've said before. It just reinforced to me, how important it is that we pursue not only putting in place the system, but that we create the system, that we build it here, and that we create a new age maritime industry, an industry that we lost over the course of generations after World War II, that we reclaim that industry for the Bay Area, excellent paying union, middle wage jobs that allow people to have families and actually live in the place and do something that's not just fulfilling our own vision to have a world-class emission-free system, but to help deliver that system to the world, certainly to the rest of our country. So we're not the leaders in this. We didn't invent it. We've been to Europe to see, the innovations that have come before us. When we went to visit with the folks in Lisbon, it wasn't clear to us right away, what kind of system they had. We actually rode the ferry the day before we visited with the folks, and it was just an unplanned ride, and it was great. But when we visited with them and we said zero emission ferry system, oh, you need to see ours. And so they're ahead of us. And I had to leave the next day, but Seamus I'm sure will talk about his experience. But theirs don't go as fast as ours will go. They have a bit different set of demands on their system, but very, very serious and very much understanding of our needs. So, my hope is that, I think what I'll ask is that for next month, we put on the agenda our process for looking at how the Bay Area can really explore, maybe with the Working Waterfront Coalition who spoke with us last month, what are the opportunities, challenges for creating this new industry in the Bay Area. Seems to me it would be fantastic for us to be close to the action as these vessels are built and the infrastructure is built and the parts are built, so that we can be, overseeing this really closely and learn from our own, development of our own system. So I shall leave it at that, and I will turn it over to Vice Chair Moyer, who I hope is going to be feeling better soon and is not with anyone either under or over 18. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. Yes, very much. I really appreciate your remarks, Chair Wenderman. I wanted to build on that a little bit, just to, you inspired me to remember that I wanted to particularly express my gratitude to you, Director Murphy, for all of the personal and professional time that you have been dedicating, and yourself as well, Chair Wenderman and others, in looking for these best practices domestically and around the world. It is something that we really prioritized when we looked at what we wanted in our next executive director and where we want the agency to go and how we deliver value and benefit for our communities. And Director Murphy, I know that you've spent an incredible amount of your personal time in this first quarter of the year in particular, and I think throughout the holidays a little bit. And I just wanted to commend you for that and really appreciate all of you who have been lending your personal and professional time to bring back these best practices, since they can inform, all that we are doing. And so I really wanted to just call that out and thank you for that. That's it for me.
Have no updates today. Thank you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed hearing about the trip. I know I got to talk to you a little bit about it and just got to talk to Seamus about it. And I'm, your words about putting together some type of work group with, our workforce development to figure out how we can, help or connect with people that are interested in bringing an industry back here that we have a long history with, that, the jobs have gone away, is definitely something that I would love to explore. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Hopefully in the future, we can get that on the agenda, because we've gotten through a lot of stuff on the agenda. Arm 3's passed, and, but, definitely would be interested in finding some people with that common interest that might want to explore, how we can bring those jobs back to the Bay Area, or if there's an interest in doing it, or how we go about doing it, because I think we're going to be placing a huge investment of, obviously our state's in its residents' money into the system, and it'd be nice to be able to do that here locally at home, or at least a portion of it, if not all of it. So that's a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Du.
Yeah, thank you. So I was invited last month to participate on another working group for Solano Transportation Authority, the Equity Working Group. And there were a lot of, representing WETA, of course, and there were a lot of conversations around State Route 37 and the tolling that they are proposing. And a participant made a comment about, wouldn't it be great if there was a direct route from Solano County to San Francisco? And I was like, hey, by the way, there is. And so it was really great to be able to promote the service we already provide, and how wonderful that service is. And so I look forward to the work of that committee going forward. And then just as we're talking about these conversations about the technology and the vessel building and all of that, I would love to see us get more engaged in conversations with the city of Vallejo and the Mare Island developer, as there are existing assets that are in need of repurposing and reusing that I think would be incredible opportunities for us. And so I hope we can have those conversations going forward.
Thank you. And yeah, when, I think the opportunities are ahead of us, and things have a way of moving quickly, and we want them to move quickly. So before we, get to a place where we look back and say, well, why didn't we, and we should do it, so we never have to say that. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to turn it over to see if there's anyone on for public comment. I know I received a number of comments, and some of you may have, about the desires to have sort of a shared experience between parking for ferry boats and pickleball courts in Richmond. So we got a lot of comments on that. So there may be folks at the meeting who want to comment on that. I said I would accelerate the public comment period. So Melanie, is there any, let's open the public comment period. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment?
I don't see anybody who's
Anyone in
raising
the
their
room wish to
hand
make a
or
public comment?
for specifically not outside of any agenda items, correct?
I'm sorry?
Outside of agenda items.
Yeah, outside of the agenda. Anyone wishing to make a public comment?
Oh,
Someone seems to be. Tara,
Sorry, can I make a public comment?
you may.
I
This
just
is
want to
the
say that
public
I'm
comment
here.
period.
I'm here representing the people in Richmond who are concerned about the Greenway turning into the pickleball club. And one of the recent problems brought up are the parking situation, which they are advertising as their parking, the ferry parking that's on the right side of the ferry building there. That's the primary place to park when you're coming to the pickleball club. And I know there may be a few other people on here, and I don't know a whole lot about the ferry building and all the ferry itself. I just came to be here for the Richmond public.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment? So I don't know, Stephen, what I'm supposed to say or not. This is not an agendized item, so we're not going to get into it or make any decisions related to this. We are, I can say the staff and myself are in conversation about this, and maybe what we'll do is, I think there are solutions in the offing for it, and maybe we could put it on the agenda for next month. Would that make sense?
Sure. That's a perfect thing to do.
Okay, so next month, if you don't mind, Seamus, let's hear about this, and hopefully with solutions, not just challenges. I think that can happen. Let's turn it over then to Director Seamus Murphy for the report of he and his team.
Seamus, we can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. Always interesting to go and learn from another ferry operator, in this case, Lisbon, and learn every time we go overseas, we learn that they're ahead of us, like you said. And Lisbon, just to go into a little bit more detail about their experience, they have 10 electric vessels that they've procured. They're 540 passengers each. They operate a similar service to what we operate. They have 7 routes. They have about the same number of vessels in their fleet. They have these 10 new electric vessels that they're procuring. They only go 11 knots, which lowers the bar significantly in terms of cost and just overall complexity of delivering a system like that. But again, they're ahead of the game, and we are. Thank you, Director Moyer, for talking about the time that we spend trying to learn from others about what we should be doing in the at our agency and in the United States. This is just one of the only areas I can think of, the maritime industry, where we're so far behind in terms of decarbonizing what we do. So it's a huge opportunity for us, and we really do, as an agency, try our best to learn what we can from others and then adopt it here and then spread the word domestically about what we're doing so that others can hopefully follow in footsteps. So another good opportunity to do that in Portugal. Sure.
How big is their support staff? How big is their staff that they have with the same?
I was going to mention that in a subsequent agenda item, but it is interesting. They have, even though the same number of fleet and same number of routes, they have 140 administrative staff. They have. Sorry. They have 300 crew that operate that fleet. Their vessels are bigger, so they have a little bit more in terms of crew, but a lot more in terms of administrative staff. So if you looked at our admin staff and the blue and gold management staff, it's significantly more. And I made sure they repeated that a few times when they let us know the size of their admin staff. And it, on the one hand, we're envious, but on the other hand, just goes to show how incredible the staff here is at doing more with less. So it's an interesting. I'll move on to the executive director's report. We always talk about operating the country's cleanest ferry system, even though we haven't delivered our first electric vessel, our first zero emission vessel. We do have the cleanest ferry system in the country, and we want to keep it that way. The FY 2024 federal appropriations request that we received, 2023 was an appropriations request that we received to make sure that our ferries are continuing to be the cleanest, and we have a subsequent agenda item that talks about that. 2024, we've been lucky to be successful 2 years in a row at receiving a federal appropriations request. This one is $3 million for the reconfiguration of the Vallejo terminal facility so that we don't need to suspend service when we have dredging to extend the facility further into the river. This project this funding will help deliver this project on time. We have other funds that are used to match these funds. There are some other discretionary grant programs that we'll be seeking to further supplement this budget, but we're not going to let that process hold us back from delivering this project. The staff has been working on a plan for delivering this project and completing the design work needed to make this project happen. So special thanks to Representative Garamendi and Senator Padilla for helping us out with this appropriations request. I know it's a long time to get through the federal appropriations process this year, but we're fine there. The second item, I want to turn it over to Tom to talk about the Delphinus. We have received the Delphinus and it's in operation, and we'll be celebrating it shortly.
Thanks, Shane. Chair Wonderman, Vice Chair Moyer, Board, Tom Hall, Public Information. Delphinus is in operation, went into operation on President's Day. I want to commend Tim Hanners and his whole team in delivering that boat. After the weather window cleared, we had to wait a little while for the weather to clear up so the boat could get down here. Once it got down here, it had COI within 6 days, I think, and then in operation 3 days later. But we needed it in operation, and the team to service. I've ridden it a few times from Vallejo. We're going to formally welcome it into the fleet next Monday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Their dignitaries, including Director Du and Chair One. And we look forward to seeing the public there. We're going to have a community ride up the street immediately following the listening ceremony. Information is available.
Speaking of cleaner vessels, we know the Dorado is 40%, consumes 40% less fuel than the Pyxis class does. I think the Delphinus is expected to be even cleaner than that. And once it's been in operation for requisite amount of time, we'll report back.
Is there a noticeable physical difference between the Dorado and the Delphinus?
If Tim wants to chime in, he can feel free. It's basically the same boat, except we added, thanks to popular demand, some vinyl screening on top to shelter more of the upper deck, make it more of a enjoyable. Heaters are being added to that upper deck as well, so that in the morning hours, passengers are comfortable at those really high speeds. And then the team is working on improved bike storage. That was a point of feedback. All three of those things were points of feedback. Those assessments are being made.
I think you are up on the schedule.
We just wanted to share some information about the next schedule change for our passengers. It takes place April 8th. And there's really just one big change. We're adjusting a midday trip from San Francisco to Vallejo. This is due to popular demand based on schedules that we had pre-pandemic and early in our pandemic recovery program. Made adjustment about 2 years ago, speed efficiency. Been hearing a little feedback from passengers. So we did a survey, an opt-in survey, really good feedback from the passenger group and really from essential workers, clearly electricians and construction workers that ride the 5:30 a.m. trip from Vallejo into the city. They get off at about 2 o'clock. Our trip currently is at 1:55 p.m. The next trip's at 3:40 p.m. That makes a long time poking around or lunch in the ferry building. So they requested that we move that trip out a little bit. And so we were able to and save some costs as well by moving that trip to 225. There are a couple of related changes on trips from Vallejo to San Francisco that don't impact many passengers. It was overwhelmingly supported by the passengers where we made. In addition, through on regional coordination on transit, we were able to work with Blue and Gold cooperatively to set in stone a couple of bid change dates throughout the calendar. So the intent is that transit operators throughout the Bay Area would have bid changes every January and August. And so we're going to do that as well. We'll have 2 additional ones each year outside of those ranges, but we'll change every January and August for the next few years. And that'll provide some consistency and some reliability for crews and our workforce in addition to our.
Tom, last item, the SB 125 State Transit Transformation Task Force. This is a new task force that was appointed by CalSTA, the California State Transportation Agency, to try and explore ways that transit should be transformed around the state to capture more riders, to deal with the various issues and challenges that transit agencies are trying to navigate post-pandemic. This was a requirement of the additional funding that transit agencies received to help bridge the gap between federal funding expiring and potential new sources of funding coming online. And it really, this is the second meeting. We just had the second meeting of this task force. Chair Wunderman serves on the task force in his capacity at Bay Area Council. I represent WETA on the task force. There are a number of other transit agencies, labor representatives, other stakeholders, and advocates who are represented on the task force. And interesting discussions have been happening there. It's really obvious how different our challenges are here in the Bay Area compared to other parts of the state, where transit ridership has rebounded in a much more significant way. Other parts of the state are much more concerned with trying to procure more vehicles, to establish more frequency on their systems to generate more ridership. Here in the Bay Area, we're still working on recovering ridership, of course, and figuring out how to better integrate our systems and improve the customer experience to encourage more mode split. The state folks who are in charge of chairing this task force have tried to navigate those different perspectives, and they've focused in on achieving the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals as sort of a starting place. And what should we be doing collectively to increase ridership on transit statewide? What are the statewide solutions that will help achieve the GHG reduction goals? And they've put it in perspective by looking at how we can most easily achieve those goals in the transportation sector. And it's good news for us, because the way that they've pinpointed the easiest solution, the easiest path to doing that, is to focus on transit trips that are in the 10 to 50 mile range, not the 1 to 3 or 3 to 10 mile range in cities, for example, but the regional trips, trips like WETA is responsible for operating. And if we look at increasing ridership 5 times what it is today on those regional trips, then we can get close to meeting those goals that the state has. So we were happy to see that the state is looking at it in those terms. It's still going to be it's going to take a monumental effort to try and achieve those goals. They used Vancouver as an example from a land use perspective and also a transit operations perspective of a city that operates services at those distances, and how they operate those services, and the TOD in the rural areas, the more suburban areas, I should say, of in surrounding areas outside of Vancouver, how they've been able to accomplish ridership that we can only aspire to. They pointed out that 15-minute ferry headways are a part of that solution in Vancouver. I said that I thought that's the sole reason that they were able to achieve the ridership that they've achieved. But the other thing that has been interesting is to hear the different perspectives about how we need to better balance the dynamics between driving and transit, and the incentives for doing both. Fact is, we just have every incentive in the world in the Bay Area and around the state for people to drive, and less incentive to take transit. And part of that dynamic can change by improving the customer experience and making transit a better experience, making it more accessible, kind of thing. But part of it can be accomplished by also recognizing that we're subsidizing people who are driving dramatically exceeds subsidized. So I think all of these issues are going to be discussed in more detail as the task force completes its work. There's a report due at the end of the calendar year that will summarize this work and hopefully have it translated into policy and work on.
I just comment, after I saw you in Lisbon, I went on to see my brother in Brighton in the UK. And if you've been to Brighton, you know, they've got buses that go kind of everywhere. They go locally, and then they go way out into the countryside, and they go everywhere. And the headways are about 30 seconds to a minute. So there's always another bus that's coming. all the time. And if you're a local person or you're a senior like my brother, or you're young, the cost to use the system is zero to negligible. For a foreigner, I could buy a day pass very easily, or I could just do like we did in Stockholm. I could click on with my credit card, and it was a couple of pounds to ride it, and then I could click on again, and it's a couple of pounds. But if I click on again and it hits 5 pounds, it doesn't go up after that. So I could use without any preparation, without having to know anything, do anything, for 5 pounds, I can use the system all day long, back and forth, which is what you kind of do. And the thought of using a car, which I use regularly here, would be almost unthinkable. So to your point, I hope through this transportation task force, the state can figure out. I know we're in a serious deficit, and probably the last thing they'll do is figure out a way to more subsidize public transportation, but it's what they need to do. And I saw a report from the Beacon Economics, which shows that we're vastly underperforming in terms of our 2030 climate goal. So, something's got to give. The transportation sector is almost 50% of the total emission, right? I'm close to that. And so, the opportunity is there if somebody feels like taking it.
Lisbon ferry ride we took was 15-minute headways. The ticket buying experience was complicated, but headways were there. Yeah, it was. Okay, moving on. I wanted to have Lauren give us an update on the state legislative program, specifically the legislation potential 2026 Bay Area transportation funding measure.
Excuse me, Lauren, we don't have any sound.
Apologies. Thank you. So last month, I gave you an update on SB 925, the regional revenue measure, authorizing legislation. There's been some amendments that have taken place. Earlier this week, Senator Wiener had a press conference and introduced the amendments that he was putting forth later that evening. Those came out and we've had a little bit of time to digest them. Just as a quick reminder, this is authorizing legislation to allow MTC to put it on the ballot. It would still need to go to the voters. The earliest it would go is about 2026. So the amendments include several things. The biggest one is after meeting with Pro Tem McGuire and some conversations, there's 2 bills that are being consolidated together. The SB 925, as well as another bill by Senator Wahab, which is asking for a study on consolidation of transit. That is being consolidated with SB 925 into what is now SB 1031. Some of the other amendments that have happened or that were included in this week's set of amendments are a floor for transit operations. So a $750 million floor to make sure that transit operations is a priority in the revenue measure. There's still a lot of things that need to be figured out and a lot of negotiations and discussions, but that will have an influence on how the revenue measure is structured. If there's a $750 million floor, then there still needs to be room for some other improvements, reforms that transit advocates are calling for, and some other areas. So I think, the total amount that the region is trying to seek is going to need to be figured out in the next while to figure out how that mix is going to work with the $750 million floor. There's also, let me see, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. The consolidation study, it goes into a little bit of detail, but what it's asking for is just an assessment on the consolidation of all transit in the Bay Area with some kind of deliverable, a plan at the moment to consolidate transit. I think some of the transit agencies are working on some language to maybe soften that a little bit, but I think discussions still have to happen with Senator Wahab, who has just kind of been folded into this recently. Another aspect, just something that we need to work out is, there's what Director Murphy was just talking about with the Transformation Task Force. They're working on some issues and strategies to look at streamlining for transit. So how does that action at the state level get folded into this if we're also looking at transit consolidation, and the timelines of both of those efforts are different. So again, lots of stuff to work out. But there's some more definition that's being applied through these amendments. It is being heard at the Transportation Committee hearing on 23rd of April, and it's scheduled also to be heard the next day in the Tax and Revenue Committee. MTC is going to be hearing the first information or a first item on it to take some action to provide direction to staff on the 24th. So the timing is a little bit funky because the commission hasn't taken action on to provide direction to staff. So things are just kind of unfolding. We're monitoring it really closely. There's about weekly meetings, so we're making sure we're in discussions to make sure that we are in the best position possible. We'll say, you know, a lot of the work that we've done, including the schedule and the bid changes that Mike and Thomas have been working on to implement at a coordinated bid schedule. We're doing a lot of work right now, and we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to make sure that we're coordinating at the regional level. So we're in a really good position to be able to comply with some of the reforms that are being suggested in the language. And so, yeah, just for that, I think we're in a good position, but there's still so much work that needs to be done with this bill. So we'll see how it unfolds. Any questions?
I like your propensity for understatement. Yes, no more questions. Do you have any questions, anyone?
Then let me invite Gabe Chan and Joe Ramey up for the ridership and recovery.
Directors, Joe Ramey, Operations Analyst with WETA. So overall, WETA's on-time performance and service reliability over the last 2 months, January and February, have been strong. On-time performance has averaged 98% system-wide for January and February compared to 97% for the same period in 2020. So slight improvement, about 1.4 percentage points. Service reliability averaged 98.5% system-wide for January and February, compared to 98.7% for the same period in 2023. So a slight decrease there. There were a total of 120 trip segments canceled in January and February combined, compared to 7,800 plus trip segments provided during these months. Canceled trips represented just 1.5% of total scheduled trips during this period. Cancellations in January were primarily due to a series of vessel mechanical issues, which I'll have Jeff talk about here in a minute. Cancellations in February were mainly due to cancellations that occurred on February 4th. That's when we canceled or suspended operations due to severe weather conditions. I would like to call up Jeff to kind of give you an update on the vessel maintenance and mechanical issues that have been generating some of these recent.
Director, Alderman, board members, Jeff Powell, Engineering and Maintenance Administrator. As Joe mentioned out, there's a higher percentage of cancellations that we've had, and there's definitely some lessons learned that we can address, and we're in the process of correcting those now. Over the course of the past year, with the drop in the reliability, we've categorized the major issues to be class-specific issues. In the Gemini class, we've experienced multiple catastrophic engine failures, as well as a host of other component failures. Industry experts, we've narrowed down the root causes, and we have an action plan that includes improving some components on the vessels and engines. Hydrous class, we've had some issues with some known casting flaws on these gearboxes. Again, we've identified these casting flaws. We know where they're at, and we're working on a plan. We have a plan, and we're scheduling to get those changed out. Pyxis class, we've also had several gearbox failures. Again, working with industry experts, we continue to try to investigate it. We're getting to a point where we believe we found some tolerance issues, and we have a plan coming up in the near future to fix that as well. Most recently, unfortunately, last Monday, we had a couple of cancellations, including the Vallejo route, southbound 7:15 and 9:30, as well as the reciprocal 8:20 and 11:30 trips. Elaborate a little bit on that. There was some work scheduled through the weekend on one of the Pyxis vessels to inspect the valves. During the inspection, it was determined that some of these cylinder heads were identified as needing replacing. Work was completed on the cylinder heads on Sunday, but the second engine valves were never checked. A technician report was given our operator not to operate the vessel until the valve inspection was completed. Monday morning, the Delphinus had an internal turbo leak that was discovered at startup. And the decision was made, these vessels offline, which resulted in canceled service. As a result of this, we've conducted a thorough investigation. Looking back, of course, we can believe that the remaining work on Pyxis would not prohibit the vessel from operating. We could have placed the vessel into service. Some lessons learned and some takeaways from that is we want to make sure that WETA has better timely notification of incidents like this, and we're not finding out at the last minute. Or the work could have been planned a little better, especially when the task at hand changed, and we're aware of that now. We've thoroughly debriefed all parties involved in these decisions and are fully committed to improving our reliability that our passengers count on. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much for the report, and really, I know we all appreciate, the hard look that you've taken at it and being able to classify the issues to the relevant to the particular class of vessels. So that's really great. I was wondering in terms of, I know, some of these vessels were purchased a long time ago, but when we see issues come up that are repetitive in nature, is it possible to go back to the manufacturers, or are there warranty possibilities, for fixing these things, or is it all fall to us to pay for the fixes?
We always take a look at the opportunity to see if there's a warranty implication there. By case basis. We also look at the frequency of these failures, and we adjust maintenance procedures as needed to decrease the amount of intervals.
And thank you. Other questions from the board? Comments? James?
I just want to thank Jeff and his team for doing everything that they are doing to make sure that the fleet stays as healthy as it can. And also the work that they're doing to, I think, just reinforce, I guess, the culture that needs to be adopted within our maintenance practices of a rider first or a customer first mentality. If we can put a vessel in service, we should put it in service. And we need to structure our maintenance schedule so that we are prioritizing having those vessels in service when they need to be. I think it's easy to get distracted from that when there's a lot of competing priorities and a lot of work that needs to be happening concurrently on vessels like we've had recently. But making sure that if we can, making sure that we're doing everything we can to have vessels that are operating at the times they need to be operating and avoiding cancellations is goal number one. So that is something that I know we're reinforcing with Blue and Gold and making sure.
And you mentioned that there were the case where, in hindsight, we could have operated the vessel. But, when an engineer is saying, or captain, I suppose, saying, we don't want to put this into service, kind of hard to argue with that advice at that moment, because the safety is, first priority, right?
It's always the first priority, but unique for every situation.
Go ahead, Director Du.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Yeah, I know I've asked this question before, but for the severe weather events or for this kind of a situation, is there like a backup mode of transportation offered or information given to passengers that were waiting on how they might arrive at their destination alternatively, or?
Take that one. In the past, we've definitely, if we have a breakdown that limits our service leaving the city, we have a page that we activate on our website that tells people how to get to BART. Coming the other direction for Vallejo, certainly we have another page that shows how to use the red line, Sol Trans red line to El Cerrito del Norte to get into the city. Don't have backup bus service currently. Something we've looked at, we've done in the past, especially when we had a monthly pass product for Vallejo riders. But we don't currently offer that. We looked at the data for this spate of cancellations on Monday morning, and really there's one big trip amongst those 4 cancellations that crew does, which is the 7:15 a.m. Ferry. Last week, 150 people rode that on Monday. This week, obviously 0 because it was canceled. We found that the next trip, which is 7:45 a.m., was up 150 passengers this Monday. So it looks like just about everyone stayed on. I rode that trip on Tuesday and talked to a number of passengers who asked what happened and explained what happened. They were like, yeah, I just went and got a cup of coffee and waited for the next one. We know that not all passengers have that flexibility in their schedule, and there's definitely going to be a negative impact on passengers. So we work to do our best to minimize it. Then once we do have an avoidable situation, to notify them so that they can make a travel choice based on their own situation.
Director Moyer?
Yes, thank you. I think Thomas just answered my question, but I know we've spent a lot of time looking at how to keep the vessels in operation and the backup transportation, but I wanted to make sure we were spending equally amount of time on getting the communications out. And I appreciate, Thomas, that you were on the next day to speak directly with the those who were there anyway, impacted passengers. So I think you answered my question, but if there's anything more you wanted to add to how we're making sure that our notifications are getting the outreach. I get the Twitters, but they're by the time they reach me, it's many hours later. So I'm hoping that's not the case for the impacted riders.
Yeah, great case or great comment. Definitely, we've divested from Twitter as a notification tool because of the changes to it, which I could go into at length, but I won't. I'll spare everyone that. Definitely, we've noticed an uptick through the beginning of the year on our text and email subscriptions for real-time alerts that we've discussed previously at the board. And so we see every time we have a disruption, there's a silver lining that more people sign up for those rider alerts. And so they are getting prompt notifications. So on Monday, those notifications went out as promptly as possible. Raphael Regan from our team does a monthly audit of our rider alerts to see when they're going out, if they're going out with the correct language, AM and PM, the right routes, and all of that stuff. And we're communicating with Blue and Gold Fleet and specifically their dispatch team to improve reliability of those alerts, because we know that communication piece is so critical.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Just like to add one more thing. You know, we've recently, we brought this, it was brought up a while back, and we recently engaged a firm to come in and do an audit of our maintenance system. I want to report today that audit is taking place right now. Interviews are set up for next week. I look to have the results from that hopefully in about a month or so, be able to report to you guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. Gabriel Chan, Transportation Planner. Just wanted to give you a quick update about ridership over the month of January. The patterns that we've been seeing all fiscal year have kind of held, which is good news because we've been a little bit ahead of the budget in terms of ridership year to date. So in January, we carried about 160,000 passengers for the month system-wide. And as I've said before in previous months, farebox recovery is sitting around in the mid-20s system-wide, with South City kind of lagging behind in the single digits. So happy to answer any questions if you have any questions about the ridership.
Questions? Thank you.
Chairwoman, that includes the executive report.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Seamus and team. And before we go to the consent calendar, I'd like to congratulate you and our team in Washington for the federal support. That's really phenomenal news. It's good to get reports like that, and I think it shows that we're on top of what's available in Washington. Not just that we know what's happening, but it feels to me like we're influencing what's happening. In reading the report from the our federal lobbyist, I like the notion that we're working with other ferry agencies, that we're stronger in number rather than just competing, and that provides an impetus for Congress to provide more. So, to the extent that we can do anything, I don't know if it's, we get a lot of visits in the Bay Area from people in Congress who don't necessarily represent the district and don't always say good things about our region, but they like to come here for other reasons. And maybe to give them, as we go forward with our zero emission program of new vessels, maybe there's a chance to get some members of Congress who are relevant to this, out on the boat, and show them around a little bit. They might appreciate the ride. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, which is the consent calendar. There are 3 items, A, B, and C. I won't read them all, but if there's anyone on the board who wishes to pull one of the items for separate consideration, please let us know and we'll pull it.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to move consent.
Okay. Any member of the public wish for something to be heard separately?
Nobody has signed up to speak.
Not hearing any, so we have a motion from Director Del Bono on the consent calendar,
A second.
and we have a second from Director Alba. And let's call the roll, please.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba, Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Okay, thank you. Consent calendar passes. Item 7, approve amendments to agreements 19-013 with Maverick Marine and 19-0-012 with Aurora Marine Design relative to inclusion of new tier 4+ diesel particulate filter technology.
Thanks, Chair Wonderman. Well, Tim is going to present the item. While Tim's making his way up here, I'll just provide a little bit of context. This item, first of all, is a tremendous first, not just for water transit agency in the U.S., but this time for the world. Nobody has been able to install a Tier 4 engine plus DPF anywhere in the world. It's a requirement under CARB that this happen. And so this earmark, I think we kind of buried the lead in the staff report, but this is the result of last year's FY23 earmark that we received. Because of that funding, we're able to increase the budget to Maverick and adopt this new technology. We couldn't have done this without the work and help from Aurora Marine Design. They're a firm that we work with regularly to help assist our zero emissions program. They're the firm that has worked with us to create the opportunity to be able to build zero emission vessels that will operate at speeds that will work for our system. And they're the firm that has been able to do the construction management for the DPF filter technology and Tier 4 engines. So nobody else has done this, and I think we sort of could have done a better job in the staff report of highlighting that. So I wanted to congratulate the team and also thank Aurora Marine Design for making this possible. The amendment also needs some clarification on the specific amounts of funding. So we have an alternative language that is in a resolution that was provided to each of you. And I'll just read the new clauses that are here so that the description of the funding and how it's allocated to various components of this project is clear. We received federal funding for this project. When matched with $380,000 of local funds, we'll meet the $1.9 million budget to include DPF technology into the vessel's propulsion system. This budget includes $825,000 for each vessel, plus $250,000 for construction management services associated with the implementation of the DPF technology. And then another whereas clause further down, WETA staff further recommends amending agreement number 19-012 with Aurora Marine Design for additional construction management services associated with the Maverick Marine contract in the amount not to exceed $350,000, $250,000 for work associated with the DPF technology, plus $100,000 for additional work related to the project delays and unrelated to DPF technology. That should have been more clear in our staff report that the $100,000 is for work that Aurora Marine Design has done, helping us navigate the delays to vessels 3 and 4 with Maverick Marine. So this is a twofold, an amendment that accomplishes both of those goals. Tim, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're getting this. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman, members of the board. Thanks for the introduction, Seamus, and the overview. Today, I'd like to ask the board to approve amendments with Maverick Marine and Aurora Marine Design in order to purchase and install the first Tier 4+ DPF EPA certified marine engines. Action 1 is to approve an amendment to agreement number 19013 with Maverick Marine in an amount not to exceed $1.65 million for modification of the vessel propulsion package to include EPA certified Tier 4 plus diesel particulate propulsion engines, and authorize executive director to negotiate and execute the amendment and take any other related actions to support this work. Action 2 is to approve an amendment to agreement 19012 with the Aurora Marine Design, authorizing additional funds in the amount of $250,000 to provide additional construction management services associated with this modification package to include the EPA certified Tier 4 plus DPF propulsion engines, and authorize executive director to negotiate and execute the amendment to take other related actions to support this work. As Seamus stated, the silver lining with this project and the delays we've experienced is we got the opportunity to let the market evolve a little bit, see what was out there, and we were able to work with Aurora Marine Design and Man Engines to develop and get quotes and to modify the engineering on these vessels, on the Bay Breeze and Solana replacement vessels, to accommodate these, which is a big step for us. It's a big deal for CARB. It also shows that this technology is up and coming and it's available and it can be done. So we're really excited about this. We're not excited about the delays within the project. The current delivery dates for the Solana Bay Breeze replacements are February 2025 for vessel 3 and October 2025 for vessel 4. Working with the yard, we've done some recent amendments with them, and we feel really comfortable with the track that they're on. They have some new leadership that was brought in to the company. Aurora Marine Design and the WETA team feel good about the progress that they're making, and this is just another good step in the right direction for us, able to work with them and negotiate this. Seamus mentioned $350,000 of this grant we're asking to be awarded to Aurora Marine Design. We estimated that $250,000 of that would be obligated for, in particular, for this propulsion package change and the engineering required to do that, to assist Maverick. Not only to oversee it, but to help the initial design, just because and that is because it's never been done. It's the first of its kind, and there's going to be some additional engineering required. We're anticipating that, and the budget reflects that. The $100,000, as Seamus outlined, is for just the ongoing construction management support that we've needed throughout the project. With years of delays, Aurora has done a really great job of holding the budget. And this additional money we feel is much needed in order to continue with both those vessels and to get the work done up until delivery. I'm here to answer any questions that.
I seem to remember a few years back, but I may be fuzzy. I remember words like "couldn't be done." Am I thinking about about the right thing here?
In public, I'm not going to say you're wrong, Jim.
Yeah, that's okay. You can say I'm wrong. I'm wrong most of the time.
You absolutely did say that, and we didn't think it was possible. And sometimes things evolve, and as soon as it became available, we pushed it. And Maverick's been great to work with through this, and Aurora Marine Design, and there's a lot more that the industry needs to come out with in order specifically for public or for private companies to be able to comply with these CARB regulations. Just having one engine propulsion package on the market is not enough, but it's a step in the right direction.
Does this impact passenger capacity or any other capacity on these new vessels? The DPF?
No, the passenger capacity will stay the same. There's a little bit of added weight. It's pretty marginal. So a slight decrease in speed, very minimal. But other than that, a little less room for the engineers in the space.
Great. That's fantastic.
Tim, thank you for the added visibility on how the funds are being expended. So on the 1.65 that's going to Maverick, is it equally divided between both vessels, or is one vessel need a little bit more than another?
We have it outlined as equally divided. In the quote that we got from Maverick, the cost for 160, which is boat 3, is a little bit more, and then we're able to negotiate a slightly lower price because there's less engineering. You're copying what you're doing. But generally speaking, yeah, the way that the grant was written and the way that we plan to spend the money is split evenly with a little bit of a difference between boats 3 and 4.
Great, thank you. What a nice way to make lemonade. Thank you for that.
Director Du?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this. It's so exciting to be a part of this and this organization. Like, so much of the work we do is really just inspirational and exciting. But so I'm wondering, will there be modifications made to, like, going back to the first 2 vessels, the Dorado and the Delphinus, to at some point to bring them up to this level?
Unfortunately, right now, there's nothing in the works for a DPF for the engine manufacturer that's on the Dorado or Delphinus. We were able to pivot before we awarded the contracts for boats 3 and 4 and change engine manufacturers because we heard about this DPF being, it being a possibility, and that was one of the main driving factors to this. When the boats 1 and 2 were awarded in 2019, that was not an option on the table. We didn't even know about the CARB regulations that DPFs were going to be required, and there was nothing out there for us to even know that this would be a factor that we'd be required to put. So that being said, now if the engine manufacturer develops product to install on the Dorado or Delphinus, we will definitely look into that.
There are members of the board? Members of the public, anyone wishing to speak on item 7?
No one has signed up to speak.
Anyone no one in the room and no one on the screen? Okay, can we get a motion on it?
Move to approve?
Have a motion?
I'll second.
And we have a second. Can you call the roll, please, Melanie? Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Hey, thank you very much. Item 7 passes. Item 8, approved contract award with Exemplify LLC, or I think I said that right, but I may not have, for website redesign project.
Exemplify is correct, Chair Wonderman. While Lexi is making her way up, I just wanted to inform the board we did receive a protest from one of the other bidders in association with this action. The procurement rules at WETA authorize the executive director to review the protest and subject matter and assess whether to accept or reject the protest. And in this case, it was very clear that we can reject the protest from the other bidder and proceed with the recommendation to award to Exemplify.
Thank you.
Madam Chair Wonderman, Vice Chair Moyer, and members of the board, Alexis Matsui, Digital Communications Specialist. Back in November, we came to you guys to approve a budget of $500,000 to redesign SanFranciscoBayFerry.com and WETA.SanFranciscoBayFerry.com, which are currently 12 years old and definitely need some improvement. So our search for a vendor was robust. We had about 32 proposers bid on the project, 21 of which met our minimum requirements. And we did a deep search into references and meetings and interviews. The search was highly competitive. We had a lot of really great qualified firms bidding on this project, and the top bidders all came in well under budget. But after a robust search, we landed on a unanimous first choice, which was Exemplify LLC. So a little bit about Exemplify, and I'll have its CEO do some introduction himself in a minute, but they were established back in 2018. They're based here in Palo Alto. We picked them for their deep public transit experience, beautiful user-friendly designs. They have a mobile-first approach, which is really important to us. And I was told they are very responsive and proactive about solutions to challenges. Some examples of work that they've done in the public transit space is building beautiful site for LA Metro, which includes service maps, a trip planner, really important timely service alerts. Ace Rail is another big project of theirs. Their trip planner is excellent. They have great rider guides and their interactive timetables. Beautiful and easy to use, both in the desktop and mobile experiences. They also developed the Sacramento Regional Transit site, and I really liked the way they feature project news and featured initiatives. Their mobile performance on that site is excellent, and they just kind of displayed an application integration that really serve us. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just mention few other things. Their references all said that they did outstanding work on enabling accessibility to their websites and making sure that that's a priority. And their project manager, Michelle Finley, got great points for apparently being a very organized and friendly taskmaster that will keep us on schedule. So just a little reminder about the timeline here. We're hoping to obviously award the contract now and right off into content audit, strategy, design, development, all leading to hopefully in October. So with that, I'll introduce Vinod Paba, the CEO of the
Thank you, Alex. I didn't realize you had all the slides, so all my notes are, but thank you for inviting me, Alexis and Director Tom for the meeting. So as Alexis mentioned, we are based in Palo Alto. We are founded by Stanford technologists, and we've been in business for about 6 years or so. And over the last 3-4 years, we've been doing a lot of work in the transit space, which I've seen some examples of. And we really have been tackling many of the challenges that Director Murphy talked about, the ridership, coming out of COVID, a lot of challenges coming back to the same, especially in Northern California, quite a few challenges. So we've been having quite a few innovative ideas to address those challenges. And we're excited to bring those learnings to your organization. Look forward to collaborating with you all and very successful. Thank you.
Questions from members of the board?
Once the design starts to happen, are we gonna get some updates and like showing how the design is gonna work and things that go along with it? And, as we bring it online and stuff like that, I guess that's one of my questions.
Yeah, definitely. We don't have a formal strategy yet for how we're going to be engaging all of the stakeholders, but stakeholder interviews, ourselves included, will be an important part of this early process before anything.
Okay, and I guess specifically with this contract, with what we're going to approve today, is this the whole contract in its entirety? So if this does go online and we start to have software issues or things like that with the contract, how does that work out? Is that part of what we're approving now, or is that going to be an additional cost as we go? Is there some kind of technical, like what's the tech service and the tech support that we're going to get from the company, and how does that work, like, cost wise, things like
Speak to
that?
what we're contracting for now, and it's the initial build, which is the initial launch development site to launch. And then the first year, we're going to be contracting for 3 years of maintenance, support, and hosting. So, about that second phase.
So yes, it does include all of the support, the hosting of the website, and the ongoing maintenance of the website. And in fact, we do this today for pretty much all the examples of what you see: LA Metro, Israel, San Diego, Sacramento. Do all the hosting, we do the maintenance and support. So in this particular case, after the site is built, we will be around 24/7 support. If there's any issues with either the site or any ongoing upgrades that need to happen, all that is.
Great. And then my last question, just because we're pretty much an international city, how many languages will this website be in, or be accessible to be used? Like, do we have an answer for that yet? No.
Yes, no limits. So the as many languages as want it to be. Mostly it tends to be about 5 different languages. Could be Chinese, English, but really there's no limit on the many. And it's fully accessible. That's a key thing. And that's a very important aspect because we're working with transit agencies. The AA compliance and accessibility and making sure people with disabilities can access the site well. It's all part of it. Will be fully compliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, that's great. Other questions, comments from board members? Director Du.
Thank you. Just curious if we can have it, since so much of our branding is SF Bay Ferry, will that automatically redirect to the site or can we have it do that? Instead of having it fully typed out?
Yes, yeah, we'll work on Sub Bay Ferry, and then any of the, as you know, the WETA San Francisco Bay Ferry site will be rolled into this. If you typed in WETA.SF Bay Ferry or San Francisco Bay Ferry, that will automatically the new.
Awesome. And then on the languages, Vallejo has a very large Filipino community. If we could have Tagalog also, that'd be great.
This includes the website for the Bay Area Council too, right? Is that what I, strike that from the record. That was an official joke. We can be dreamers. Other members of the public wish to comment or have questions on this item?
No one has signed up to speak.
Well, let me say, this is very exciting. Can't wait to see the creative that goes into it, and we wish you well, and the team will provide all the support necessary to ensure a good partnership. So thank you for applying for the opportunity. I know there was a lot of competition. I think over 100 firms sent in proposals and so forth. So obviously you've distinguished yourself with the group that well, then extra credit. All right, thank you very much. Oh, we need a motion, I think, on
I'll
this.
move to approve the contract award to Exemplify.
I'll second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Can we, any further discussion? Hearing not, let's call a roll.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Excellent. Item number 9, authorized release of a request for proposals for a consultant to assist with planning relative to the future of WETA's operator agreement.
Joe Ramey, Operations Analyst. So under this item, we're requesting permission to release an RFP for consulting services to assist WETA with the development of the next ferry operating. And so as many of you are aware, we are currently in the process of getting started the next agreement, how to structure it. The current agreement with Blue and Gold expires December of 2026. We have about 3 years to get this process started. And, given the complexity of developing the new operating agreement, the goals WETA has, the electrification program, all the changes that have taken place since the initial agreement was inked. And, we feel it would be great to have a consultant kind of augmenting in-house services of our staff to look over our shoulders and provide high-level strategic recommendations in the areas of financial structure, term length, operating requirements, market research into what other public agencies have done, like New York Ferries just recently, and just to see how other public agencies are structuring these contracts. So we would be looking for a consultant that had kind of deep experience in structuring public transit contracts and preferably recent. With that, I'll take.
Very good. And so the idea of this is to have the process in place to award a contract in 2026 so that we take all the steps necessary and we don't get behind it.
So this consultant would be augmenting our abilities, in-house abilities, work on, in kind of areas of where we would be focusing, and we'd love the board's feedback on the scope of this consultant's work. Conducting interviews with WETA management staff to understand what opportunities exist for contract improvement, performing market research to understand how similar agencies have structured their contracts in recent years. most relevant, New York Ferry recently comes to mind. And then provide recommendation for key contracts terms. So talking here about financial structure of the contract, so ways to incentivize the operator to maintain excellent service, grow ridership, and really hit the targets of any other performance indicators that we're interested in. And then develop the RFP documents and provide support during the award and license. They'd be really augmenting us in that process.
Is the intention to have specific goals and objectives in developing the RFP so that, when the responders have a chance to respond, they really know what we're looking at?
Yeah, so I think, in my background in consulting, we would, with the request for proposals, we'd have proposal factors and questions, reflect kind of key goals, the agency, what we want to see and what we would like them to respond to. Those goals and objectives would be incorporated into that process and the contract.
Thank you. At what point would we be stipulating what the review process looks like? We do that in the RFP? Does that come later? How do the proposers know on what and how they're going to be rated?
Proposers for the ferry service?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would, in my experience, would all be spelled out really. So we'd say, these are the questions, these are the response, here's how the panel will be. All that would be just completely.
Okay, and the board will have a shot at the RFP package before it goes out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you've answered my questions. Members of the board, any questions? Comments? Are there any members of the public by chance wishing to speak on item 9?
Yes, Mr. Bobby Winston, go ahead and unmute yourself.
He's not a member of the public.
Um,
Go ahead, Mr. Winston.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, esteemed board members, I am here once again on the topic of workforce development and how it relates to the item before you. As we discussed last month, workforce development is a key component in creating a pipeline of skilled workers to operate, maintain, and expand Bay Area ferry service. Ensuring that a workforce development component is a part of the next WETA operator agreement is paramount to this effort. May I quickly report some continued success regarding the Working Waterfront Coalition. We finalized our plans for our first training cohort of welders, engineers, and mechanics, as well as a collaboration with IBU to train deckhands, which will also feature up training of existing deckhands who aspire to be a senior deckhand or even a captain. The TWIC project is thriving. We provided the required workforce component for the recently awarded Port of Oakland's $50 million grant for the West Coast's first electric tugboat. That will provide some $250,000 to train the workforce needed in connection with this new maritime technology, which will be a challenge for WETA as well. And late breaking news, we just hired our first key employee, a rock star woman that you'll all be meeting, Keely Ayana Carter. I'm here to ask that you all prioritize workforce development in the WETA's operator agreement as they plan this RFP. Including it in the procurement planning process will ensure that workforce development is a holistic part of the next San Francisco Bay Ferries operator contract. I ask you prioritize it at this early stage by directing the consultant that you select to prioritize and include real, meaningful workforce development provisions in their work product. Workforce development is important, and I urge that you make sure your RFP consultant understands this. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Other members of the public on item number 9?
Marina Secretano?
Welcome aboard.
Wonderman and directors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to comment on a few things before you get going in that process. We spent months in the first go round working closely with MMP and working closely with master mates and pilots and with the staff and with our attorneys and your attorneys and trying to come up with some protective language. And, our workers, we represent the senior deckhands, the deckhands, and master mates and pilots, the captains, engineers, and so on. And I just wanted to say that, the problem for workers is they want to make sure there's continuity and that the company values them, that the agency values them. And ways that that can be seen is whether or not, you're taking care of them in the process that you're about to go through. We came up with language that we think meets our concerns. The only thing missing in that was to include our ticket staff and the customer service folks. They weren't in that first go round, but we do have a hiring hall in there, a pension or healthcare, and things that are important for people to keep them working. And, the success of this operation has been, the agency being able to combine all the services to be able to fund the services. And I think Blue and Gold's done a great job and, delivering that. And, I was listening to, this is off topic, but, we're talking about breakdowns. Geez, at the same time you were having all those breakdowns, Golden Gate was having those same breakdowns. These high-speed ferries are a lot of maintenance. But we would like to just say that going forward, we will be in contract negotiations. I know you know this, but we are going to make parity with Golden Gate this next go round. It's been a 30-year effort on our part, but we feel like we're getting, to the point where we can do that. So Bobby mentioned about the Working Waterfront Coalition. I just want to chime in. It is an amazing opportunity here. We talk about shipbuilding and how a lot of the shipbuildings in, with Alaska, Portland, San Diego, Seattle, Whidbey Island, nothing here really. And so I just heard from the Maritime Commerce Advisory Committee, they're getting rid of the dry dock too. And it's so sad because, what we need to be doing is thinking, how are we going to get, people trained up? And there's thousands of people that work in those shipyards to deliver those vessels, So anyway, in this effort, I'm working with Bobby also to try to see that we can make sure we keep attracting new workers and training them up, providing that for them. And it's an exciting effort, but anyway, so I just want to end with saying that you got an amazing workforce, highly trained individuals, and we want to make sure they keep their jobs and they're covered under our union contracts, and all the above. So it'll be in that document, hopefully. Okay. Thanks.
Be assured, we value the workforce tremendously. None of this would be possible without having the Class A people we have. So thank you. Any other members of the public on item 9? Either virtually or in person. Okay. Any other closing comments? Any?
Your input, I appreciate it.
Thank you. So let's, can I get a motion on item 9? Is that you leaning forward, Director?
Yes.
Indicating such motion? Have a motion? Second?
Second.
Director Delvano, seconds. Call the roll, please.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba, Director Del Bono, and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Motion passes. Item 10. Approve revised fiscal year 2023-2024 salary schedule to include reorganized and additional positions.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Very excited about this item. I see we have David Carroll here. Melanie, if Tim McKay is also available. can turn his camera on or whatever we need to do to make him appear on screen. That would be great there. So let me just tee this up before I hand it over to David Carroll from APTA and Tim McKay from Jacobs. First, I want to just thank the board for your patience with this item. We first talked about going and doing a peer review of this agency to identify ways that we might be able to reorganize to be better equipped to deliver our capital program when we discussed the budget last year. And so it's been quite some time. We've gone through a deliberative process. In the meantime, at that time, you gave us approval for 5 new positions to sort of keep our heads above water. And I can say that it's barely been able to do that. We've managed to make progress on the projects that we've received funding for. We've managed to identify even more funding to be able to deliver even more projects consistent with our overall capital program and to take our planning for our Bay Ferry 2050 plan to the next level. But we know we can't really deliver this capital program without additional resources and organizational capacity. And so we asked APTA to the American Public Transportation Association, who's very experienced in looking at transit agencies and conducting peer review processes, identifying experts in their field to help tackle hard questions like this. We asked them to do that for our agency. Next, I just want to also thank the current staff at WETA. Before we talk about how we might be able to do more with more organizational capacity in a reorganized agency, it's just worth reflecting on what this agency has already done with so little. I think when I first came on board here at WETA, I was shocked that the fastest growing transit agency in the region was composed of less than 20 administrative staffers. And the amount of work that that group has been able to accomplish is just incredible. That ridership wouldn't have grown without work on the capital program to add new services and new routes and new vessels to the fleet. And the fact that they were able to do that with the amount of staff that they had on board is just amazing. But you can only punch above your weight for so long. We need to grow if we're going to be able to do what's being asked of us, especially with Regional Measure 3 funding now available. That was our trigger to think about what we might need in the future. And so we knew that we didn't want to just depend on ourselves to make those decisions. We wanted to make sure that we were deliberative and thoughtful about making those decisions, and we wanted to make sure that we were asking the best and the brightest in their field who have experience delivering billion-dollar capital programs about how they would reorganize our agency and expand our organizational capacity if they were in our shoes. And so that's exactly what we've done. David Carroll was the leader of the peer review process. He's the Chief Operating Officer at APTA, and I'll turn it over to him to walk us through that process and talk about some of the recommendations. And Tim McKay from Jacobs I like to call him the chair of this panel. We didn't really have a chair, but he was one of the first voices that spoke up and helped us think about how this panel should be organized. And he'll give a perspective from a panel. Go ahead, David.
Well, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Members of the board, Director Murphy, thank you for involving us in this process. You can go to the next slide. APTA represents the public transportation industry, including the ferry industry. And one of the great things about this industry is the fact that agencies really are not competing against each other. So they're extremely interested in and amenable to supporting each other through peer reviews, through benchmarking exercises, through really sharing each other's experiences. We represent very small agencies and all the way up to New York MTA in New York. They all have extremely productive and important capital programs. And based on what Director Murphy asked us to look at, we tried to tap into really some great expertise from agencies and just people who have that experience in organizing and managing big capital projects and big capital organizations within their agencies and all. You can go to the next slide. We had Tim McKay, as Director Murphy mentioned. Tim was at DART, ran their capital program. It has now got a very successful practice at Jacobs. We have Marion Lee, who had been at Sandag and is now at Lighthouse. David Sowers, who is the terminal engineering director at the Washington State Ferries. And Carrie Roca, who's the chief capital officer at MARTA, which is a very large agency in Atlanta. And before that, I actually worked with her in Connecticut, where she was very involved in as a consultant in a number of programs. Well, let me just start by saying we spent quite a bit of time talking to staff, and I will tell you that in the course of my 40 years plus of experience here, you have one of the most passionate and dedicated group of employees that have done more with their limited numbers than just about anything I've ever seen. And it really is a testament to the agency, to the staff you've been able to assemble over the year, to Director Murphy's leadership there, and we really applaud that. With access to more capital coming in, and particularly federal capital, the needs of the program begin to change. The goal is to try to be responsive and accountable for use of that money, for the use of public funding, without becoming bureaucratic. And that certainly is something that does not yet exist at WETA, and we would certainly hope you can avoid. But with additional capital, with additional federal and state funding, come certain responsibilities and expectations from those that are reviewing how you use those funds. And that really drives some need to reorganize and to grow capacity in order to address and successfully effectively implement the kind of capital programs, the electrification projects that you have, the expansion that you have, and to convince the public to keep credible with a public that is always careful about how public officials spend their funding. You can go to the next slide. So we were asked to basically look at two things. What are the elements of an effective accountable program? What are the principles really by which transit agencies and really most organizations organize their capital programs? And then two, to really benchmark WETA against some very transit agencies with some very successful capital programs. And as I mentioned, just on our staff, but a lot of these folks have experience elsewhere, is MARTA, Washington State Ferries, the Port of San Francisco, Sandag, Connecticut DOT, a whole group of agencies that have both ferry operations, train operations, bus operations, and all. But really, what are the elements of a successful long-term capital upgrade and expansion program in terms of the organization? And next slide. And please interrupt me as I go through this. If you have any questions at all, I'm happy to try to answer them. And Tim, when we're done here, I'm very happy. Tim is here too to provide his thoughts on it. So we started off with a discussion amongst the panel members as to what makes for an effective capital planning program, and equally as important and more important to some extent, an effective delivery program. The first and always abiding issue is credibility, accountability, and consistency. You need that credibility grows on itself. A successful project begets another even more successful project. If you run into credibility or accountability issues with FTA, the federal funding agency, or state or local funding agencies, it becomes harder and harder. So that's really the starting point. And a key element of that is a project control function that is really responsible and accountable for and can report about schedule, costs, on a current basis, where it's going, and project status. One of the issues is avoiding eggs all in one basket. And what WETA has done with its limited staff is astonishing. But much of that depends on one person to kind of manage all elements of the project using consultant expertise or their own expertise, internal expertise. But it's a very horizontal or complete process right now. So one person basically, an idea is formulated and one person's put in charge of it and really carries it all the way through. And that's great. But in today's environment, employees aren't hanging around as long. Things change, project management needs change, and projects get so complex that it's sometimes important that people specialize in specific areas of a project and not be that all one person fits all. And that's the other element, is that no one size does fit all. These projects today are just very complicated. They require handoffs, smooth handoffs between different areas of expertise. Project planning is very different than project delivery. You don't have really great planning up front. It gets very difficult to design, engineer, and ultimately deliver the project. Public relations with respect to each of these projects is really an art form. And it's nice to assign public relations aspects to a project manager, but that's not actually what they're ideally trained to do. Grants management, speaking the language that FTA and state people speak, that auditors speak, is again, it's an art. And so all the bigger agencies or all the people with bigger capital programs really focus on these different areas to make sure they're getting the best planners, the best project delivery, the best PR, the best project controls within their organization, so that each can leverage the skills of the next slide. So again, WETA has been incredibly effective at delivering projects to date. Your planning development group has focused on landside and terminal improvements. It's also responsible for service planning and fare structure. Operations manages waterside capital projects, even though it's called the operations group. Each group really manages vertically and horizontally through all these project stages, as I've suggested. And that's great up to a point. But as I said, as the program grows, it's probably not the ideal way to go. Project controls, grants management, regulatory oversight are handled as needed right now. But as this program grows, and particularly federal funding aspects of it grow, those are going to become all-consuming and very regularized processes. FTA does these triennials. They may start assigning PMOs to oversee projects, and you really need folks that are skilled in handling those types of folks. Next slide. Our recommended approach is really a set of principles, and then to see how those play out in an organization. But a larger long-term capital program, and I think that's what you're trying to create, does require greater depth. It requires accountability and some vertical integration, some specialization, and it requires really a balancing that WETA has done phenomenally so far, on balancing between staffing on a permanent basis and use of consultants. Permanent employees, if the work is always there, are very helpful because you build institutional knowledge, and basically you're able to capture the expertise that people grow. But you do have that's not typically how capital projects run. You feast and famine, and so the question is, what is the permanent staff that should be hired to carry the program through, to provide the consistency, to provide the institutional knowledge, but how do we best rely on outside consultants to really hit the peaks as those peaks develop, so that we're not burdened essentially with a lot of extra staff when we're not at the peak. Second, operations and capital are very, very different functions, and it's very impressive that your operations group is able to deal with the capital requirements and capital responsibilities of the vessels and to date and some of the electrification work. But they really are two separate things. It's best for operations folks to really focus on how do we run this stuff, to communicate their needs to the planning and capital folks who can then make sure that in that pipeline, the resources are being spent and the work is getting done to keep that operations well maintained, well operated, and customer friendly. Dedicated planning and delivery really makes sense with a mature capital program. They should cover both landside and waterside projects. They're intricately linked, and this provides a consistency through all of the planning. The planning includes the environmental approvals, includes the funding estimates. It really helps you discern your pipeline, your needs, your resource needs, and the delivery side being the folks that actually are responsible for the engineering and the construction work. And finally, you really need a dedicated project controls. Again, what you all have done with the work that Aaron does in the CFO office is great. But there is nothing like someone who has spent their career doing scheduling. It can completely change how projects get phased, how they're communicated to others. They can bring costs dramatically down depending on the phasing and how projects are scheduled. All of that, again, being aligned with the CFO, whether reporting to the CFO or being aligned with the CFO, is really critical because that is the link, and that's the person often doing the reporting to your federal and state folks. Next slide. So what we recommended for the organization was clearly that you need more people. You need an expanded organizational capacity. Again, balancing that mix of permanent staff and consultant resources as needed. But we felt, despite all you've been able to do with those folks you have, Portugal may be a bit extreme with 140 people, but there's probably a happy medium that'll ensure and build the kind of consistency and accountability that you need. We recommended breaking up the capital organization into a couple of groups. First would be to create a chief capital program officer. That person is really responsible for overseeing the planning and project delivery. And it can be, and I think what we're recommending is also the project controls. So that person really is the person who would be reporting to you every month on the state of the capital program, how individual projects are, how they all holistically fit together to support your long-term goals, particularly as you engage in something as complex and fundamental as electrification of your facilities and your fleet. Next slide. Second, right now there's a lot reporting to Director Murphy, and with the kind of organization that we're suggesting, it should free up some of his time to be more focused on the larger vision, the accountability that is required as he manages up, and really to reduce some of the demands on him to manage down. And I think he may not enjoy the loss of being as in touch with everything going on down below, but it's really critical with a good capital program, with all good transit agencies really are reliant on that executive director to be managing and working with the board, working with state and federal officials, and really to be the face of the organization while other people are getting so much more of the work done. On emergency response, right now that is handled sort of amongst various folks, but we're suggesting that operations really include an emergency response and a safety function that works very closely with the board, and obviously with executive staff. And the criticality of that is in the event of a safety event or an emergency response event, you can see years of credibility and great work go right down the tubes if it's not handled right, if the public feels they're not getting the right story, if mistakes happen that could have been prevented. And this way, there's a responsible person who's working with the capital program, working with the operations side, really to ensure the safety of the work that's being done, and that keeps you out of the news to the maximum extent they can. And then lastly, a handoff management. Right now, one of the good things is because people carry projects really from planning all the way through to completion, there's not as much of a handoff issue. But as you create groups that are really specializing in what they do best, that handoff management really becomes much more critical. And there needs to be that feedback loop coming from operations to say these are our needs, to the capital group that translates those needs into planning for capital investment, and to the group as the planning finishes up. You don't want to lose all the good things they did as it then gets handed off to those doing the project delivery. And then once that capital program is done, you want to make sure it's a good handoff, and that in fact operations has been heavily involved in shaping all of that work before it goes off to be implemented and used through the operations group. So handoff management is really extremely important as we build really separate groups here. I'm not, Tim, if you are on perhaps as a panelist and a very skilled capital projects officer, if you have some thoughts on all of this.
Yes, great. Can you hear me, David?
Yes.
Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Director Murphy, I would be remiss if I didn't echo the fact that the participation, the engagement, the level of enthusiasm from the staff was really a pleasure to work with the team as we explored opportunities. The foundational premise came out of leveraging the existing talent that you have and to implement a one-team concept. And in that concept, where planning engages in their traditional training, having delivered projects in smaller numbers in the organization really helps them, because they have an appreciation for what needs to happen, in the delivery part, which is final design and construction. And then also engaging in operations from a standpoint of operating. So, we looked at it from the standpoint of there's really 3 phases of the project. If you boil it to high level, the planning phase, communication with the public on what you're doing, communication with stakeholders, planning for grants, planning for different programs, environmental practices and policies. And then as that transitions into the development phase, you have final design and you have construction. And so planning now is supporting that team, where that team takes commitments and mitigations that were informed into the planning process, and they carry those forward and put those on paper in final designs, and then ultimately construction. And then during both of those time periods, operations is heavily involved to make sure that at the end of the day, what is what is planned and what is designed and what is built is operable in the most efficient process. We very much endorsed the fact that your executive director, your CFO, really good people, and during a large capital expansion, they have to have the right people underneath them carrying a lot of that load so that they can continue to focus on visions and continue to focus on agency development as a whole, and not have to be in the day-to-day operations when it comes to the capital expansion. So I think as you leverage what does your organization look like today, and then utilizing this large expansion and also taking advantage of what does the organization need to look like after the expansion to be able to operate and to continue to provide the public with the type of service that they're accustomed to, is a lot of hard work, and we believe these recommendations will assist in that. And so, again, thank you very much. And thank you to the board for your public service, because too often that goes unappreciated with the role that you play in these projects and these services. So I will rest at this point.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, David. There's a salary schedule, updated salary schedule that is in the packet that reflects the 9 new positions that we would be adding to the organization, and also the 8 revised positions, because we're reorganizing. There are existing positions that are having revised roles and responsibilities. The organizational chart that's also included in the packet has those positions included, the 9 new positions, as well as the new titles for the revised positions. We've done our best to take the recommendations from the panel and have it translate into an organizational chart that we think reflects the concepts and the recommendations that were put forth. We, as a small organization, I think my first day here, Nina told me everybody here does a little bit of everything. And that's what you have to do in a small organization. And as we grow and as we expand and as we're asked to do more, that strategy just becomes less effective. And we heard that loud and clear from the APTA panel. Specialization becomes more important. A horizontal organization becomes more of a hindrance than something that's helpful. And so this organizational chart is more vertical. You can see it has consolidated responsibilities, the most important of which is within the capital program. We had previously a planning and development department that was responsible for taking projects through planning phase, and if they were a landside project, through the implementation and development of those projects. And then a separate operations group that was responsible for delivering projects that were on the water side. And the peer review panel felt strongly that we need to have a different kind of organization, an organization that lets planning focus on planning and lets a project delivery group focus on delivering projects, and has a chief capital program officer who can be accountable for the overall program and can help guide the handoff between planning and between project delivery. We've had a lot of conversations about what that handoff looks like, and it's become clear that I'm not very good at navigating when that handoff should occur. So having a capital program delivery or capital program officer who can help with that is going to be instrumental. Service planning would still be retained within our planning group. We thought it was important to keep service planning separate from operations, so that the operations group can stay focused on delivering the service that's being planned by our group. And the service planning work that we've done as a part of the pandemic recovery program, for example, has been so successful. We don't want to lose that. The concept of ramping up and ramping down work and using consultants as the tool to be able to do that is something that we've really embraced here. Obviously, we would never propose to go to 140 administrative staffers. I don't think the Portugal agency probably is able to ramp down very effectively, but keeping permanent staff minimized at 9 new positions and using consultant resources to help us ramp up and ramp down as grant funding becomes available and is spent down is a concept that we've embraced here. Focused roles and responsibilities obviously is another concept. The administrative support in certain areas is something that is reflected in this organizational chart. The emergency response position that's dedicated is a great example of that. I'm really looking forward to having that position. I think it's long overdue. And it's going to relieve some of the work that others have been doing as a supplement to their regular roles and responsibilities, and have it dedicated and focused in one area. IT is an area that we've talked about for a long time, is a gap in this agency, not just IT for our administrative staff and making sure that we have the right systems and that they're functioning, but IT for our customer facing customer experience enhancements. Having somebody who's focused on that work will help us accelerate those improvements. And one of the more, I guess, unconventional things that we've done as a part of this organizational chart is to have customer experience and operations under one roof. So we have a director of operations and customer experience that would be responsible for day-to-day operations. We wouldn't be able to, I think, do this without having a contract operator that minimizes the management of those day-to-day operations. One person will be able to continue to do that, especially with maintenance and engineering being retained within the capital project delivery group. But having our operations team also focused on marketing our services to new riders and communicating with existing riders is, I think, going to pay off. It really is. There's a lot of connectedness between that work and the operations work. We have another budget analyst that's being added to our finance team, we know that the grants that we've received are going to require a lot of management. We've added new positions previously to help with that work, and the budget analyst working with the project controls person, which is also on this org chart, will provide finance with much more clarity on management of the capital program. The project controls position that the panel recommended is within the project delivery organization, but there's a real clear dotted line to finance. Obviously, that's more of a matrix management position, if you will, because it is so focused on the financial aspects of the capital program. The other thing I just want to point out is that this org chart was modeled after other similar organizations that are tackling similar challenges. The Port of San Francisco, for example, was one that we took a close look at and modeled our org chart after how they're set up. And then the fact that over 60% of these new positions will be grant funded. I just want to call that out, because anytime we're adding resources like this to the organization, the question is always, well, can we absorb that from an operational cost perspective? We know this work is, there's already grant funding lined up to support this work. There's going to need to be more, and we anticipate that about 60% be grant funded, coming from operations, largely out of our. Happy to answer any questions or respond to comments.
Thank you. You want to take a break for a while, or should we keep going? I'm just kidding. Well, thank you. Appreciate. I know that a lot of time and effort and thought went into this, and want to thank APTA and David and Tim, for your work on this. Really appreciate the amount of not only thought that went into it, but real consideration, and deeply appreciate the very kind things you said. I think you said about the kindest things I've ever heard said about an agency. I don't, I don't know that anything really compares to that. So certainly very heartwarming, and I think very, very well earned. When I joined the board, years ago, I asked, well, how many staff do we have? And I was shocked by how small it was. And I'd ask Nina Reynolds, the previous director, at times, shouldn't we have more staff, to deal with some of the things that were coming, we're in, and she would basically, tell me to in a nice way to kind of pound salt. It wasn't her view of things, and it really, normally wasn't mine. I came from public administration in the city of San Francisco in the mayor's office, and I never met a department head who was requesting less positions. And so it was a constant work to try to justify when organizations in government want to grow. And to David's early point that you made, you said, we don't want to just create bureaucracy. And I think that one of the ways you don't have bureaucracy is by having everybody doing everything. Because then they know everything, and there's a lot of cross functionality. And although it's things are done seat of the pants and not the way they really should be done, it avoids people getting in a stovepipe situation, and this is your job and that's not my job, and that kind of thing. And government kind of gets known for that. So you're looking for the right balance in which you're not creating bureaucracy, but you're giving people the opportunity to do a good job and have organizational performance be at the highest level, and what the public should expect to happen based on the public investments that are being made and the outcomes being sought. And so, in reading this report before we had the presentation, and then listening to it and hearing Seamus's comments after it, the last thing I would do is really second guess the particulars, because there's more than one way to go about these things. But I think that there's a lot of sensibility in separating the capital function from the operating function, from the financial function, and to ensure that there's sufficient professional capability to get the job done. And if I once worked in the organization, it was a private company, and the CEO who said to me, if you don't have the resources, don't take on the responsibility. And I think in some ways that's sort of where we are. If we were to go forward and try to implement the capital program that we have envisioned, we'd be up against that in this situation. And what ends up happening is, you hire more consultants, which isn't necessarily the most cost-efficient way to do it, and you lose the capability of creating the right kind of team and the continuity that goes along with that. So my sense of it is it's a really good balance. There's some exciting new positions, I think, and probably some opportunities for people on the team to assume some of those positions. I'm guessing that they won't all come from the outside, but I guess there are processes that go along with that we'll go through. I think it's our job as a board, what you called hands-off management, I would call, not micromanagement when it comes from the board's point of view. So yes, this certainly, Seamus was telling me that this was coming when we were in Lisbon, and then he set it up, I think, with those people from the agency there to say that they had 3,500 people on staff, and wasn't really very much. And like, well, why don't we have? So it seems like a pretty decent increase without going over the top, even though it's absolutely material. But when you think about what we said we want to achieve, and we actually have the capital to go about it, let's get the right people in, and let's have the right structure, and let's get it right, and not have everybody reporting the executive director, so you can properly focus and make the best use of your time and expertise, and then let other professionals do their job. And so I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And I'll go back and appreciate the really kind comments made about the organization. I think it's been miraculous what's been able to be achieved to this point. But, we're now entering another round of the fight, and we need to have the right balance, the right staff with the right credentials to get this job done. When you think about what we're doing, it's really, we're doing things no one's ever done before. And we need to do them right, and we need to get it right. And even if we make mistakes along the way, we need to make the right mistakes for the right reasons. So with that, I'll open it up to other members, but I support what you're doing. I think it's, that you went and pushed for outside review from such a professional group of people. It was the right thing to do. So that gives, credibility to the effort, and that we can defend it, I think. And we'll I'd like to hear from my colleagues on the board for your thoughts about it, and then from the public as well. So maybe Vice Chair Moyer, I think you're an expert in organizations and right ways to spend money and not to, and yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but thank you for asking. I think your comments are well taken, Chair Wonderman, and I really appreciate, thank you, everyone, for the presentations, in particular, the hard work that was done by the review committee, but David and Tim, I appreciate the way that you organized the presentation and presented it to us. I particularly am quite enamored with the fact that you looked hard at the way the Port of San Francisco is organized, because I do feel that having spent a lot of time there, it really did work well. But putting that aside, what I would like about the proposed plan, there's so many things I like about it, not the least of which is the 60% funded from grant funding, back to OPM, other people's money, is always one of my favorite things. But also the fact that it mitigates a lot of the risk. And you've mentioned it, Seamus, in your remarks in a lot of different ways, just from having a number of people doing so many different things, but also just we are taking on a lot of responsibility on behalf of safety for the public welfare, but also for the fiduciary responsibility for all of the funds that we're receiving. And I do think that this is long overdue to make sure that we are being extraordinarily careful and thoughtful in how we're doing that. That said, I've been watching WETA for longer than I can remember, and the work that has been accomplished by the staff is extraordinary, as has been said. And I don't want anything that is said today to take away from that. So thank you to the staff for all the hard work that has been done. And then, as Seamus knows, I am most excited about having a dedicated staff person for emergency response. And I hope that we never get to the point where we need someone to be that that quarterback, if you will, because such an emergency has happened. But having been involved in several of those myself, there's just no substitute for that kind of expertise. And I think that our responsibilities there are pretty sizable if and when, hopefully never, something really tremendous does happen and we are called upon to respond. So kudos to everyone for leaning in, and I look forward to how we can roll this out, in a way that is as seamless and cost effective as possible, but the net benefits to me seem very, very clear.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moyer. Members of the board, fellow directors, Director Delano.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think we've recognized staff all the time, and there's nothing's changed about the staff here. I think we have one of the best staffs of any agency I've ever seen. In 9 positions isn't going to make us a bureaucracy anyway. So I think the good part is, like, we're going to have a lot of institutional knowledge here, and we're going to hear some stuff around the water cooler about when I first started out, this is how we did things. So I think it's good that we have people that worked here when it was, when they were doing everything, and now they're going to be able to pass that down and really share that institutional knowledge with the people we're going to onboard here, and the agency still, to me, is pretty small for the things we do. And I think it's really exciting that this is happening because it shows we're growing, and we're successful, and we're not laying people off. We're not filling positions. We're actually moving forward, and I'm excited to see what happens. And appreciate the consultants' view of things and the board, your panel's view of things. I thought it was really informative. I learned some things of how you look at stuff. And then the organizational chart, I think, is excellent. It's something I've worked under for 30 years, so I got to look at the organizational chart and see how smooth things look. And I'm excited, and I have full confidence that everybody in this room and who's not in this room is going to be able to onboard people and continue to have a huge success on the waterfront with not just capital projects, but how we deliver our service, and how we manage our team here, and also how we answer the calls for the crews out with blue and gold and stuff like that. So thank you. Good job. That's all I got.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone has said. It's thank you so much to the panel, the APTA panel. The work that you've done is so important, and it came right at the right time, pulling in this fantastic group of experts. It's phenomenal. I appreciate the timing that things have progressed over the past couple of years, with RM3 being released, and knowing that we can depend on that funding source, knowing where we want to go with the electrification and decarbonization, and how we want to work with the region, what our expansion plans are, and then having on top of that this panel review. It's fantastic. I have a lot of confidence in the org chart that you have developed, and look forward to seeing individuals that are already shining get to shine even brighter in their new roles, in their new capacities, while also being able to guide others up within the organization. And bringing in a little bit of new blood, fresh blood, is fantastic. It's just overall very, very exciting. One question that I have is about the emergency response analyst, whether when we have a big event, how important is it for this individual to be able, does this individual have enough clout and power to guide the organization, or will it depend on who is part of the EOC at that point? So having that defined as part of the org chart as well might be a next step, so that we know how this analyst mid-career individual fits in within the leadership team. I think that's really, really critical, whether we need to elevate this position slightly, or if an analyst position is sufficient. And so that we have, when something big happens, that we have the right people in the room at the right time, and that blue and gold, all of our partners and stakeholders around the Bay Area know who to listen to and go to, so that this person has to expect and also can escalate to the right people.
Good. It's a really good question. And it's one that we asked ourselves when we put this position on the org chart. It also brings up a next step that's important. We are going to obviously write these new job descriptions. Next step. We're going to make sure that all of the positions reflect the roles and responsibilities and functions that will best contribute to the agency in that role. Emergency response is one that we want to have at the level of respect that you just articulated. We want this person to be in charge of our emergency response program, to be able to structure our internal training the way it should be structured, so that everybody understands what the they're supposed to do in an emergency, to work closely with our contract operator and other operators around the Bay so that they understand what their role is in responding to an emergency. And that job description may end up being an analyst position. It may end up being something else. We have a classification and compensation study that the board included in the FY24 budget that we paused as soon as we realized that this work, it was going to result in a pretty significant reorganization and some pretty significant new positions. And so we are going to restart that. And when they look at the emergency response analyst position and the other positions on the org chart, that study may result in a reclassification of the job based on the role.
Fantastic. I think that sums up my comments. Fantastic job, everyone, and the panel as well. I really appreciate all of the hard work that went into this effort.
Thank you. Okay. Members of the public on item 10? Anyone signed up for 10? No?
Nobody has signed up to speak.
Anyone here? Yeah, and Tim or David, any final, I think you may set, your slides said final comments, but
Yeah.
having heard what we said, do you take it back?
Just one comment on the emergency management. I worked for 20 years at Amtrak, which has certainly its many disasters, and I worked at a transit agency in Charlotte, and we had issues as well. One of the best ways we went through to figure out that type, exactly the question you asked, was to go through some exercises. Let's assume there's an accident. What do we do? And in that process, you can begin to understand what we want this person to do based on how we would organize around an emergency. We went through that exercise several times at Amtrak, really, both to make sure everyone knew what they were supposed to do, but to figure out from a decision-making point of view, because accidents never happen during working hours. They're always at some crazy time when no one's around. How do you plan for that? And it's a successful, effective exercise to go through to help pin that type of issue down. But in any event, thank you very much for the opportunity to support you guys. We're here to help, continuing to help. APTA is always ready to help. Thank you, Tim, for your expertise. And Director, you were great, and your staff is phenomenal. So it was really a great opportunity for us.
Thank you. Important to remember that the emergency we're thinking about may not be attached to our own assets. You know, maybe a land-based problem that, you know, requires a sea-based response. Well, this is great. So we'll appreciate all the comments. If it does nothing else, we should materially be able to increase the crowd participation in board meetings as a result of this. So that's at least one big plus. Go ahead, Melanie. Would you? Oh, we need a motion, right? Do we need a motion? Who would like to make a motion?
I'll move.
A motion from Vice Chair Moyer
Second.
and a second from Director Alba. Please call the roll.
Chair Wonderman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Del Bono,
Yes.
and Director Du.
Yes.
The item passes.
Thank you. Item, congratulations. I know a lot of work and a lot of thought went into that. Item 11, internship capstone project, parking and access study.
I'm not the intern. I have a lot of great introductory remarks about Noani. I'm not going to be able to give any of them because she has to get to Berkeley by 6:15 to chair Transportation Commission. She was recently appointed to do that. So that should speak volumes to what a wonderful talent she is. I'm going to turn it over to her to give a sample of the great work that she's done for us over the course of the last year. Last day is March 25th, and she's been our third intern. Big shoes to fill, but we actually have a hiring process for our next intern that we expect in a few months. I'm going to turn it over to Nalani.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, board, chair, vice chair. Vice chair, please let me know if you can't hear me. Board of directors and staff, it's been a privilege to work with you over the past 9 months. I've learned so much. The project I'm presenting to you today is a culmination of my research that I started in October. I would like to thank Gabe and the planning department, but mostly Gabe for helping coach me through this project. And without further ado, take it away. Oh. So the background and purpose for this study is to understand access to terminals. Currently, the onboard survey is our only access method, our only method of understanding access to our terminals, but that's geared more towards passenger satisfaction. We have a waterside landside split. Of course, we own the waterside, cities own the landside, and this creates some issues with intermodal connections that require a lot of collaboration, and so some challenges in organizing that. I also wanted to center this study around informing current and future terminal planning and terminal access policy development and implementation, as this will become a focus for the agency over the next several years. The priorities of the access policy, which will come to you shortly, I believe, include access equity, reducing the drive alone rate, and improving bike ped access to terminals. So I'm super excited to see that come to you and to see that be a priority of the agency. Just as a resident of the Bay Area, I think it's super. So my methodology for this study included 3 weeks of manually collected parking and access data. I collected data at Alameda, Seaplane, Oakland, and Richmond terminals, and I compared this data to the 2022 onboard survey. I also developed typologies to quantify mode share to terminals, which I'll talk about a little more in a bit. And the terminals that were selected due to proximity to me. I live in Berkeley, and staff capacity. There was no way to study all terminals, and this is a very limited internship capstone study. So these were the trips that I studied. I looked at the Monday 7 a.m. trip from Alameda Seaplane to San Francisco Ferry Building, the Monday 7:30 a.m. trip from Oakland Terminal to San Francisco Ferry Building, and the Richmond Wednesday 7:30 a.m. trip from Richmond to San Francisco Ferry Building. The Richmond one started a week later because the air quality conditions were not so great on that Wednesday of the week of the 18th. And I studied these terminals for 3 consecutive weeks in October. So some limitations for this study. The Oakland parking data is not available to us. That data is managed through ski data. I tried to gain access to that data through communicating with ski data. Ultimately, they ghosted me and I was not able to gain access to this data. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But that data limited what I could infer about Oakland access. The other limitation, as I mentioned, was time, scope, and staff capacity. It was just me visiting these terminals, rushing around in the morning. This study could, of course, be replicated later with further staff capacity, or some of the suggestions I'll reference in a bit. So I looked at Alameda Seaplane. I just want to go over some Alameda infrastructure and access modes. Alameda is partially connected to the terminal by protected and dedicated bike lanes, which is awesome. The 2022 Alameda Bike Plan calls for more connectivity across the island, and more plans to connect both terminals by bike and better pedestrian access. Our 2022 onboard survey shows that 25% of Alameda Seaplane ferry riders access the terminal via bike, which is the highest in the system in terms of bike access. Oakland, on the other hand, the connections from downtown Oakland to Jack London Square are poor in terms of bike and pedestrian access. If you've biked to the terminal, you may know this. I know this. I bike to the terminal. The Oakland Bike Plan shows that 77% of fatal and severe crashes occur on 3% of Oakland's streets. And Broadway, the critical connection to the Oakland Ferry Terminal, is amongst those 3% of streets. So the city is beginning to explore Broadway and safety around the train tracks in Jack London Square. So that's super exciting and something to pay attention to as we advance our access policy. And an overview of Richmond. Richmond Terminal connects to the Bay Trail, which is a wonderful north-south connection. And recent upgrades to Harbor Way in Richmond allow 1 mile of protected bike lane, yet fails to connect to downtown Richmond, Richmond BART, and the Richmond Greenway, which causes some mixed connections for cyclists to connect to areas that are really important in Richmond, or critical connections to other transit agencies. Richmond riders are 11% bikers, 5% walk to the terminal, according to our onboard survey. And I developed these ferry terminal access typologies. These are based off of the access mode share distribution in the 2022 onboard survey. I developed these to help us understand where sustainable access is strongest across the system. I think this can really help us to quantify multimodal access and understand what works to lower our drive alone rate to terminals. Potentially the agency can develop these further, refine these typologies, and focus on terminals for implementing the access policy that maybe have high potential for reduced vehicle miles traveled. There's a little bit more about this in the report and how these typologies can be applied to the access policy and furthering sustainable access to terminals. I also want to talk about terminal access equity. Bay Ferry 2050 centers diversity, equity, and inclusion as a key focus, centering policies to help the most vulnerable ferry riders, so those without cars or transit access, as they are an integral part of the Bay Ferry 2050 visioning. This graph shows that drive alone rate is the most popular mode amongst all income brackets to accessing ferry terminals, but this graph also shows that the mode share distribution by percentage of income bracket, that non-car access modes are more popular for low income riders. Furthering to the discussion on equity, this graph from the 2022 onboard survey shows that the highest percentage of low-income riders are at the Vallejo terminal, and that the non-car access mode at that terminal is about 10% currently. So my argument is that improving bike ped infrastructure is critical for rider access equity, especially for our most low-income riders. So here are my study results from the data I collected. Alameda Seaplane averaged 67% park or drive alone rate, a 19% bike to terminal rate, and a 12% drop off rate. In Oakland, the parking data was unfortunately not available for me, but I did find an average over the 3 weeks of 12 bikes boarding that trip and 1 scooter, and that's how a lot of folks are getting to the terminal. In Richmond, I saw an average of 80% parking at the terminal or driving alone to the terminal. 11% were dropped off, 9% biked, and 2% of riders scooted to the terminal. Here are the results compared. As you can see, Richmond, the drive alone rate that I measured is much higher than what the onboard survey shows. Same with Alameda Seaplane, though it's less of a difference. I think there are some reasons for these discrepancies, including my data collection does not count all of the modes that are counted in the onboard survey. The onboard survey response rate varies per terminal. Some of the onboard survey response rates for the terminals are very low. Some of them are much higher. It's hard to capture the same picture of data with the limited study that I've done. But here is the data side by side. Okay. I have some future work suggestions for areas that the ferry could focus on based on my findings of the study. A preface to this, that there's a full table in the report with an implementation matrix that includes the cost, a cost estimate, a level of effort required, and a duration of time for each of these recommendations. And under each of these broad recommendations are specific recommendations that can help improve all of these items. So my first recommendation is improving safe bike infrastructure and bike parking to promote sustainable terminal access. This could include specific items such as implementing a safe routes to ferry program. This is mirrored off of a program that BART has, which is called Safe Routes to BART. BART uses agency funds to manage and implement a grant program to partner cities, where partner cities can apply and receive funds to improve bike ped conditions around surrounding terminals. Of course, this is limited by cost. It would require high effort on behalf of staff, and so there are many limitations to this. My second specific recommendation is access policy implementation, of course, and I'm super excited to see the agency do that. My third recommendation is secure bike storage, which would require a lot of collaboration with cities to install, but could potentially be lower cost. And this is used at Alameda Seaplane. And I did see scooter riders using it there, and it is just a very nice thing to have if you're traveling there. Another recommendation is to promote bike share in partner cities. This would also require collaboration with cities and effort on behalf of staff. My second recommendation is to pursue ferry-oriented development. Of course, this may be very difficult, requires lots of collaboration. We don't own the land side and could be very politically difficult. It's a big ask, but maybe it could be part of terms of service for a new ferry terminal or something that the board could consider exploring or the agency could look at in the future. My third recommendation is parking management strategies. I am recommending that we implement some type of automated parking data collection. I didn't do a lot of research into the devices out there, but I'm sure that this could vary in cost and effort, but could provide us with a constant flow of data, much like the ones that I looked at for this study. I also recommend gaining access to the Oakland parking data portal. This is something that staff must pursue further, even though it's hard to communicate with them. I think it would be very helpful to have that data and understand how many riders are parking in the Oakland structure and if that is impacting ridership in the ways that we believe it is. I think it's integral to know that. My other recommendation is to work with cities to develop paid parking programs. Some cities are already doing this. This would require collaboration, and of course we don't own those parking lots, but this could be a great parking management strategy to free up spaces that are taken all day. My other recommendation is to improve curb management, which is a part of the access policy. And in terms of Richmond, maybe pickleball parking management. My fourth recommendation is to install electric vehicle chargers at terminals. We are already doing this. We just received a grant to do this at Richmond, which will also give us money to electrify the terminal. So that's awesome. Just continue to do this. And my fifth recommendation is TDM strategies, possibly improving connections with other agencies to make it easy to transfer from one agency to the other. I know as a transit rider, I really appreciate things like that. Working with cities to develop shuttle programs and advocating for fare integration, subsidized pass programs, such as Bay Pass, which has been incredibly successful, but the future remains unclear. So it's another thing that we could focus Okay. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have time. Do we have time do you have to go or you got a few minutes?
What time is it?
You have to go?
I have a few minutes.
All right, we'll have time for a few questions. I'll ask about 14 and then, so first of all, thank you very much for the work. And, sorry you weren't able to get the data from Oakland because I think that's obviously an important piece, but, it's very illuminating. Did you take a look or do you have the data on, are the parking lots filling up or not? Are we dealing with capacity issues in the parking?
Yeah, so I didn't gather exact numbers on that because I was alone and rushing around in the morning. I think an expanded study could illuminate that better, or possibly an automated parking data collection device. But I can tell you anecdotally that the parking lots are filling up in the morning.
They are. Yeah. So reflecting on your data, and you may not like this question, but if you take a look at the data, the way people prefer to go, the preferred way of taking the ferry, I don't know if it's more than 50%, but it might be. But at least the modal way would be to drive, park, and take the ferry. So if you take a look at the attendance on our ferries, half the people who are on the ferry drove, probably alone, parked, and took the ferry. Now, if they hadn't driven, parked, and taken the ferry, then they probably, I'm going to guess, would have driven and just driven and then gone to their destination. So we took a lot of cars off the road by virtue of having the ferry and having the parking available for them to do that. Now, I think it's obviously worthwhile to look for the mode shift and, how do we make it easier for people to take a bike? How do we make it easier for people to, have a transit connection, a shuttle? I mean, I think all of those things. I really like your suggestion about ferry-oriented development. You didn't invent it, but you're pushing that's what we, I think that's actually a very realistic approach, because people like one trip. And if they have a chance to take one trip and they don't have to get to it, then they're not going to use their car and they're just going to get on the ferry. And so I think there's a really, it's even a reason why people will choose that development because of the ferry access, although I'm not a, housing marketer. And then it doesn't just necessarily need to be housing. It could also be where jobs are, I suppose, or other activities. But, since we know that people prefer to take their car, park, and get on the ferry, why wouldn't we look as an option of making more parking available? Because that's what people like, whether we like people liking them or not, it's what they choose to do. And so, ultimately what we're trying to do is get people out of their car and onto the ferry, or certainly onto the ferry. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an honest answer because you add more parking, you add more demand for parking. It's the same with roads. You price parking, then you might influence people's decisions to get to the terminal differently. If you provide safe bike infrastructure or better pedestrian infrastructure, you might influence people's decisions. Well, that's a nice bike lane. I don't live too far. Maybe I'll just, I can tell you from my experience, I have a car, I drive, I don't like driving, so I prefer to bike places, but it's really scary. And I would bike a lot more places if the infrastructure was there. Just as we can induce demand by adding more parking, we can induce bike demand by adding more bike. That would be a really nice thing to see. My ferry terminal is Oakland. I live in Berkeley. I take Oakland home sometimes and then I go on a nice bike ride. The conditions getting from London to downtown Oakland are very poor. A lot of the sidewalks are non-existent. Bike infrastructure is scary. Drivers are scary. And there's ways that we can protect the most vulnerable people on our streets. And I think if we have the chance to work with cities to do that, it would be well worth our time.
Yes, and I think all of that is we should do those things for sure. Just from a market standpoint, we know we have a very attractive way of using our product, right? And that's how I use it, although I actually usually carpool. Like today, we have two of us that go in a car, and we pay nothing to park there, right? And so it's attractive. If we start pricing it up at a certain point, you're making it a higher cost to use public transit by charging for the parking. And I think it's one of the reasons why, I took my car to the ferry a few months ago, but I couldn't make it on time because of the traffic, and I needed to get to work, a really important meeting. So I went to, what did I do? I couldn't get across the bridge. It was well over an hour, and there's no way. So I went to BART. So I went to the BART parking lot knowing that it would be full, and I got to it and it was empty. And what the heck? Something wrong. And it was empty because so I parked. And I went in to pay my $3 a day parking, and it was, I think, $12 to park there and to go one station. And I thought to myself, don't ever do this again. So don't take transit. Next time, allow a little more time. And if you can't get to the ferry, drive across the bridge and so forth. So I really appreciate the work that you did. But I'm also, I'm a transit nut. So I'm one of those people who I love public transit, but I'm also a realist in that, when we have 80% of the people in the Bay Area choose their car in a single occupant vehicle, which I think is around the number, as the way to get around. And at some point you try to, figure out how to make it work. Anyway, Jeff.
I'll hurry. He's a car advocate. I'm not. I'll give another story. There was a guy I met with that was mad about the parking at Bay Farm Island Terminal. And I said, where do you live? He lived 5 houses down, and he'd get in his Escalade in the morning and drive right down to the parking terminal. So, I mean, it's, there's two sides of the story. What I do want to point out, though, that I thought was interesting was, and I know you probably don't have the opportunity or might not have the opportunity to do this, but since we have the new next mayor of Vallejo sitting here, she already heard it, but was the Vallejo and the Richmond bike issue that, it'd be interesting for the city to hear that, because especially on that greenway there in Richmond, there's not a lot of housing around the Richmond terminal, but if they made it more accessible for a bike to get there, especially because those are probably two of the areas that most of our families that are low income live, to be able to bike or find another means to get to the terminal is important, because cars are expensive. I mean, everybody knows that has a car. So I thought it was great. I thought you did a great job. I got something out of it. And I agree with Jim on the number 2 one. It'd be so nice if we could do development on in the next to the ferry terminal. But that's like you said, that's a political hot topic, but maybe one day we'll get there. So thank you.
I would say, just to respond first to Jim, I do think that the ferry is a very attractive public transit option for cyclists, because bringing your bike on the ferry is a lot less of a hassle than bringing it on BART.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I wouldn't underestimate the amount of people that would be super, super happy to choose the ferry over BART if the infrastructure was there.
And I think we've tried to make the boats accessible, and it's the infrastructure in between that's a challenge. I'm all for it.
And to respond to Director Del Bono, when I went to the Richmond terminal the first week, I biked to my BART station. I took BART at like 6 in the morning, and I got off in Richmond and I tried to bike to the terminal. The bike lane was terrifying. The no bike lane was terrifying. And then the bike lane, when I finally got it, was like a breath of fresh air. So it would be very nice if it connected all the way. And I think that is absolutely important. I have a few more minutes.
I'll go next. I
We need to go
love
quick. I
the
took too much
discussion,
time.
and thank you so much, Nolani, for producing this while also in doing your internship. And I would agree with your recommendations. 50% of our trips here in the Bay Area are shorter than 3 miles, which is an easy 15-minute bike ride if we had the bike facilities. 50 to 60% of the population would love to bike if we had the safe bike infrastructure. So building more parking on valuable real estate and having it go up in a parking structure where you pay anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000 per parking space, it's not a good use of our funds, of our land. And so we, very oriented development, bike lanes, possibly, I know this is a tricky one, but it could be incentivized with carpool parking, where you might even get free parking at the trains or at the ferry terminals, of working with our city partners on this. And then, of course, the drop off, it's a car trip, it adds traffic, but at least it doesn't produce that parking trip or parking demand, I should say. So everything that you have in the report is great. And I think it just provides this foundation for the typology development around our stations and thinking about what we can do and how do we partner with the cities on providing the right infrastructure. So thank you.
Pippin?
Yeah, just real quick, I echo all the comments around the dedicated bike lanes and of course scooters would also use that. I see scooters a lot on the Vallejo ferry. And super interested in ferry oriented development, particularly considering that Vallejo is currently has lots of parcels on the waterfront that are available for development and are about to go through a new updated specific plan. So very interested in that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What prevents us, Seamus, from us being the developer of those parcels? You know, or are we as a public agency excluded from, you know, maybe that's a subject for another day?
It's a subject for.
I see Steven smiling back there saying, yeah, and it's been a long time. But you know, hey, there's other ways to make money and lose money in development. Thank you very much. We want to get you so that you don't miss your obligations.
My own commission. Thank you, board. Thank you, staff, for giving me this opportunity to be an intern here. I've learned a lot, as I said at the beginning, but I just want to express my gratitude again. Thanks.
And you'll be a
Thank you.
future rider from Berkeley. Right?
Thank you so much.
Stephen, did we fulfill the obligation under the public comment period by doing it earlier?
Yes.
We're done with that. Okay, so with that, thanks all, and the meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you.
Wrap it up.